Research firm Gartner Incorporated forecasts that end-user spending on wearable devices will hit a new high worldwide. Over $81.5 billion in 2021, up 18% from 2020. The Wireless Communications Alliance and Voler Systems presents a webinar on wireless AR and VR. We look beyond the world of consumer products to the future of wearable technologies, using this tech in the workplace. Using virtual and augmented reality, new applications are emerging. They drive productivity for a range of industries, from medical professionals to engineers and manufacturers. Providing new solutions for everything from task tracking at a construction site helping a doctor remotely assess a patient. The lineup includes leading experts in the Internet of Things, AR, VR, and the public cloud.
And then we can kind of get started, and I encourage everyone to ask questions in the chat room while we proceed. So thank you very much. Jeremy, to you.
Thanks, Andy. Yeah, I'm Jeremy Toll. I'm the board member and vice president of the Wireless Communication Alliance. This is a great series that Andy's come up with, talking about wearables in the AR, VR world. So the WCA has been around since 1994. We're a nonprofit business league dedicated to collaboration in the wireless industry worldwide. We've been bringing you wireless webinar events for the last year plus through the pandemic, but we've done a bunch of in-person events as well, and we run off of volunteers and sponsorships. Next slides, please, Andy. So that said, we'd like to thank our sponsors, Asbill Corporation, Google, CIG, SensorWorks, Etherdyne Technologies, Voler Systems, Energis, IoT Nation, Mobile Experts, and Sensitel. And if you find this to be of value and you'd like to be part of this organization, we'd love to discuss sponsorship with you. So please feel free to contact me at jeremy.toll@wca.org or go to our website at wca.org. Next, Andy. And for the events, beyond this great event today, we're going to do one in June that's talking about open Wi-Fi along with the Telecom Infra Project TIP, July broadband for underserved rural areas, and in August we'll do IoT applications, private equity and hedge funds. We'll be getting some people from the investment community, and September is a flagship event called IoT Gizmos and Gadgets. We're going to do that in conjunction with an Oktoberfest, and if all goes well, that will be an in-person event that'll be hybrid with a webinar. And then finally, for this year, we have another flagship event, What's Hot, What's Not. That's usually the week before Thanksgiving, and that will be talking about trends for what's hot and what's predictions for the future. And then a couple housekeeping items. We're going to use the Zoom chat section for questions. We're still learning about real-time comments on questions, so we would prefer to just have you write them in the chat and let us know what you want, and then we'll feed that to Andy and he'll be asking the questions. We're also recording this, and the presentations and the recordings will be available on the wca.org website within 48 hours. And would like to say greetings to the world and thanks for being our guest. We're definitely excited to have people from all over the world now, and that's one of the silver linings of this pandemic for the last year, that we've been able to reach more people than we have in the past.
Well said.
Okay, so, and then finally, the thing that you guys all really came here for is this this chance to win a bug repellent fan. You must be present at the time of the raffle, and we will send the fan directly to the winner. So once your name gets called, please send a private chat message to me, and I'll get your contact info and we'll send it to you. So roughly an hour into this presentation, we'll do that, and then the presentation will continue, or the Q&A will continue after that. So give people an opportunity to check that out.
It's not wireless per se, but it's wireless wind. So, you know, just think of that.
It's wireless wind, right?
Yeah, there you go.
It's portable.
It's portable, right?
Yeah.
Thanks for that intro, Jeremy. I think we can. Yeah, we can get started here.
Without further ado, Andy Doe from SensorWorks and the WCA.
Appreciate it. Thank you, Jeremy. Yes, hello everyone from around the world and East, West Coast. Thank you for coming in your evening for the East Coast folks. Today's agenda, we're going to talk about wearables, and wearables. We could talk about all the what a wearable is and so forth, but we're going to focus a little bit more on smart glasses and AR and VR. So with that, I had a slide for an introduction in terms of wearables, and this is what I came up with. This is just me Googling and finding out, the evolution of a wearable, right? And, there's such a thing as an abacus ring, so that you could say that's the first smart ring that was ever invented. I don't know how you can actually do any math with that little pin. First radio hat, so that was before the radio, the portable radio, and then the hearing aid, and then the pacemaker. Surprisingly, I found this old picture from a company, and it was the size of basically an AV cart. So I didn't realize it was that big in 1958. Then, of course, the evolution of smart wearables from the 80s all the way to the 90s. I can't see anyone wearing that and looking cool. So we're trying to be more cool with the invention of the smart glasses from some of the leading tech companies today. So I'm hoping that today we'll be able to talk to the panelists about what it means to use and wear a smart wearable and make it cool, and what are the applications out there. And as I mentioned in the abstract, the wearable market is huge. I was blown away in terms of what that market potential is. Gartner forecasts about $81 billion in wearables, whether it be smart watches, smart glasses, et cetera, for to be in 2021. And wearables today is not such more of a fashion statement. It is actually a productivity statement, and you're going to listen to a lot of these speakers talk about how it's being used in business. So with that, I'd like to introduce our first speaker, or give you an overview of the speakers today. So we have Walt McClay from Voler Systems, who will talk about wearables from a design perspective, and he has a wealth of experience there. Next, we'll talk to Josh Gertz from Teamviewer, who has the perspective of wearables in terms of the platform. And then lastly, Tom Harshbarger from Senix to discuss the applications and talk about Microsoft's initiative into this very hot space. So with that, I will hand it over to Walt and do an intro. And before I do that, let me introduce Walt formally. So Walt, president and founder of Strawberry Tree Voler Systems. They are a top electronic design firm in Silicon Valley. Voler is particularly experienced in designing wearables and IoT devices, and particularly in sensors and wireless technology. So with that, Walt, did you want to share your screen and get to it?
Thank you very much, Andy. So I'm going to introduce you to several things that will help you with the rest of what we're going to be talking about today. Okay. So first of all, just to briefly talk about batteries, everybody would like batteries to be smaller and last longer, and they're looking for big changes in the future. And I'm afraid that's not going to be what's happening. They're not changing very fast. If they changed like semiconductors, you'd have a device the size of the head of a pin that powered your car and cost a cent. And we're never going to be there. We're limited by what you can store in the chemical energy. So we're going to be working around those limitations forever. And that means in one area, we're going to be looking at the wireless communication. how do you do wireless communication efficiently? And there are basically three ways that you get data from a device, a wearable device or an IoT device, into the cloud. Some devices go directly to the cloud. Your cell phone does that. Some devices use a gateway, and this is very often Wi-Fi. So you've got a Wi-Fi gateway that's connected to the cloud, and you just go to Wi-Fi. And it doesn't need as much power as cell phone. But a very common way for a wearable device is to go to a mobile phone, which is the gateway. And very often you're using Bluetooth or Bluetooth LE, which is very, very low in power. So let's take a look at some of the wireless technologies that are available, and they each have their strength and weakness. We take a look at the first four on here. These are all long distance communication intended for low data rates. So LTE-M, NB-IoT, Sigfox, and LoRa. Now, when I say low data rates, the first thing you look at is data rate of 1 megabit per second for LTE-M. Well, it can do that, but it's not really useful for that. It's designed for much lower data rates, as are the others. And in many cases, you're sending a few hundred bits per second. And what they're really good at is going a long distance at low power. Some of them support audio, some don't. It's important to understand about public network versus private. A cell phone uses a public network. You pay to be on the network, but you don't have to install the infrastructure. It's there. You can roam easily. A private network is where you put in a base station, and as long as you're near that base station, it works, and when you move away, it doesn't, but there's no monthly fee. However, there's an upfront cost. So you'll notice that LoRa is very interesting. It has both. You can put in your own base station, or there's a portion of the country that's covered where it's available and you can roam. The big advantage of LTE-M and NB-IoT is that they now cover well over 90% of the country, and they're available in a large part of the world, though notably India and China are lacking, unless that's changed very recently. So it looks like Sigfox has very low density. Most people don't have it. So being public only, it appears like it's losing out in the race of who becomes the standard. Now, you take a look at these others. Bluetooth LE, that's Bluetooth low energy. Mesh is new, but this is for a small area. You know, if you can go more than 10 meters, you're doing well with Bluetooth or Bluetooth LE. So it's limited in several ways. Zigbee is a mature capability. It's been around for several decades. It's used quite a bit, but since Zigbee isn't built into cell phones, anytime you want to use a cell phone, it's not a good choice. And then of course, Wi-Fi and whether it's LTE or 5G, it's cellular. The big advantage there is speed. You know, you can send streaming video on either one of those. Wi-Fi doesn't go the distance, but it's got less power. So now let's take a look at a comparison of power, distance, and data rate. So across the top of the next chart will be different data rates. Down the side on the left is different distances, and the power consumption will be in each of the blocks. So here I'm looking at 100 bits per second, very slow, 10 kilobits per second, which could just barely handle audio, and above 40 kilobits per second. So even that is fairly slow. And then between a meter, which everybody can handle, and over a kilometer, which only a few can handle. So take a look at the upper left corner, right over here, Bluetooth LE, BLE4, it says, and Zigbee, as well as BLE Mesh, less than a milliwatt. They're the winners in the low power, and that's why Bluetooth LE is so popular, but the distance is very limited. It won't go 50 meters. The speed is quite limited. It can go at 10 kilobits per second, but not above that. So there's trade-offs. Standard Bluetooth, you may not be aware, is very different from Bluetooth LE. It consumes a lot more power. It does go faster. It's designed for audio. It also is limited in distance. It doesn't appear down here in the 50-meter section. Wi-Fi, of course, quite a bit more power, but it can handle any of these speeds and much more, way higher in the megabits. And Wi-Fi gets you to 50 meters, but it doesn't get you to a kilometer. Now, in the next block, you're seeing LoRa, Sigfox, NB-IoT, LTE-M. These have very low power, as long as the data rate's low and the distance is low. Notice what happens when we go to the next block at a longer distance. The power goes up quite a bit. So as you move around, the power is going to change. They're still a lot lower than, let's see, if you look over here at the next column, cellular at 200 milliwatts, LTE-M, even LTE-M and NB-IoT at this speed, they're going to be 100 milliwatts. So you've got all kinds of trade-offs of power, speed, and data rate. But what is interesting is that because NB-IoT and LTE-M now are available almost as much as cellular coverage, I think they're going to become the standard when you want a device to connect directly to the internet. Now, let's change and give you a little different background. We're going to be talking about augmented reality devices, augmented reality glasses. What's in them? What kind of hardware is in them? Well, they all have a processor, and almost every one of them is designed for video streaming. So it takes a fairly powerful processor. This is not low power. They have a display. They display on the glasses. Sometimes they'll actually display directly on your eye, but most of them display on the lens of the glasses. There's almost always a camera so that you can pick up data or video as well as displaying it. A microphone for audio is almost always there. Because you're streaming video, it uses Wi-Fi communication. There's nothing that's going to handle that speed. It's lower power. And then they often have Bluetooth communication so that you can turn off the Wi-Fi. May not always be streaming video. And then you've got a much lower communication, much lower power communication. But obviously not good for video. There's frequently a motion chip. Motion chips are inexpensive and used for lots of things. For example, you can detect the position of the head and the motion of the head. It's great for doing a wide view. As you turn your head, you can update the video and it looks like you're in a complete, well, with VR, you would do this, but even in AR, it may be helpful to understand where you're looking. Gesture recognition is common. Since you don't have a keyboard, how do you communicate with this device? One way is with gesture recognition. Another way, of course, is with voice. And then you have a battery. And because these are some power-hungry devices, the camera and the microprocessor, the battery needs to be fairly good sized, and there's a significant trade-off between how heavy this device is and how long it lasts between charges. Now, before I turn this over to everybody else, so you can learn more about the AR devices, let me just tell you about some interesting wearable devices that I'm familiar with. And of course, AR and VR on your head. Glucose monitoring is done with patches. If anybody has diabetes, you may be using those. They're common now. Sleep monitors are becoming popular. They're used in different places. One is just to monitor your sleep. You can get an app on your phone even that'll do that. But there are devices that you can put on your chest that will monitor your sleep as effectively as going to a sleep lab. But in a sleep lab, your sleep isn't very normal. With these devices, you sleep in your bed very normally, and you can do several days worth. So they're better than going to a laboratory if you're diagnosing a sleep condition. EEG devices mounted on the head, for example, as a helmet or just as glasses with electrodes. They can be used for monitoring disease or for games. There's a device that was introduced several years ago where you think and the device moves and you control the speed and the direction of its movement. Hearables, people have been wearing earbuds for a long time for listening to music. Since they're already there, and the ear is a great place to pick up signals from the body, it's now possible to measure heart rate, SpO2, which is oxygen in the blood, and of course motion with a hearable. And these devices can be pretty small, so you can still have audio at the same time. We developed a leg band that goes around your leg and monitors swelling after a knee replacement surgery, so that the doctor can know remotely how the patient is recovering. There are infrared light devices that are supposed to change your mood. I don't know if there's been any double-blind studies on these, so there's some uncertainty about how well they work, but apparently they do work. Voltage is used to treat pain. So some of you may have had devices where, if you've got back pain, they put a TENS device, TENS. That's fairly old technology. But there are also implanted devices that relieve pain. And in some cases, they treat disease. For example, there's one device available that stops tremors. And it's just a device you wear on your wrist, and you use it several times a day. There's a device you put on your head that applies a magnetic field that stops migraines. There are some shirts out, and they typically monitor ECG, oxygen, breathing rate, and other parameters. The shirt is a convenient place to make these measurements. But if you're running, you may not be wearing a shirt. So there's a pants that will measure your ECG. And measuring the ECG in pants is difficult. The ECG is electrocardiogram, the heart signal. The signal isn't as strong when you get away from the chest. And to be able to measure it while you're running with dry electrodes is difficult, but we came up with an algorithm that worked. And then one that you may have seen several times, it's a real popular one, is monitoring glucose in the eye. This is not a real device. It's a novelty that, yeah, they can monitor it, but I don't know how well they can convey it wirelessly and how long it works. It's not ready for prime time yet. The Mojo lens is a display that is on contact lenses. And that one, I'm not sure if it's actually a device yet. That's getting into the early stuff. But Sony has a pocket air conditioner. It both heats and cools. You wear it on the back of your neck, which seems to be a very efficient place for making you feel comfortable by changing the temperature. So there's all kinds of wearable devices, and it's growing every day.
Yeah. Hey, thanks for that. Well, yeah, there's, it seems like wearables that you've mentioned, the Wacky wearables, are all touching some sort of the five senses. And I was going to ask the panelists to think about a Wacky wearable. So just to kind of tie it onto what you did, what's the wackiest wearable, the most absurd wearable that you have seen out there that either you have touched, designed, or heard about?
Well, asking me, that's what I was just showing you. That's the weirdest things I've seen.
Okay. Yeah, I could see you've touched every much part of the body. So thank you for that. I appreciate it. So with that, I'd like to introduce our next speaker. And our next speaker is Josh Gertz. So Josh, hello, welcome.
Hello.
Great, we can hear you, thank you. Yeah, so Josh works for Teamviewer, 25 years in new media, high-tech sales. He is the enterprise account exec for Teamviewer and acquired formerly the manager, U.S. sales manager for UBMax, which was acquired by Teamviewer. Also a founder of an involvement in the mp3.com site and business, Neurotic Media and DAQRI, as well as the CEO Zachary. I knew I had probably should have said that, what my brain was thinking. So Zachary, and CEO of Grids VR. So Josh, I have to say, when I started this excursion or this process of learning about AR, VR, smart glasses, which I thank my friends at Teamviewer for sending me this, I was not sure what I was getting into, and in terms of, the vision thing and having one thing blocked. And, I think the audience would love to hear from you to kind of demystify what is AR, and the difference between VR and mixed reality. There's all these, these terms that are thrown around. Can you help clarify what that means to be an AR device and,
Sure.
what smart glasses?
Absolutely. Yeah. Thanks, everyone. Thank Andy for inviting me to speak today. Thanks, everyone, for joining. Let's talk a little bit about wearable devices. And you can't see my desk, but I've got a whole cornucopia of every wearable device known to man, including the ones we're going to talk about in a few minutes. But point being that wearable computing is a methodology of taking generally instructions that you would have been getting in an industrial environment and moving those out of your hands onto something that is wearable. And that could be a head-mounted wearable, could be a wrist-mounted wearable. We see chest-mounted wearables. We see wearables that are mounted on the trolley or the forklift. The question is, the idea being that your hands are not occupied by that screen. And then that further drips down into the idea of these are being used for AR. And I want to talk about that for a minute because that term gets thrown around a lot. The typical term AR, as it is, I guess, used for a long time, is augmented reality. And what the heck is that? I'm sure most people on this call know this, so I apologize for the basic nature of this. But augmented reality is digital information superimposed on top of the real world. When I got into this business many years ago, the only good example that everybody knew was the yellow line on the football field when you're watching football. That the players don't see that line. That's the TV station or the network imposing that on top of the digital image to create an experience for the user. And then a few years ago, luckily, a game called Pokemon Go came around, which if you have kids, as I do, you know Pokemon Go because it was an obsession. And now there are children all over the world holding up their phones in front of fountains and battling dragons. And again, those images aren't real. They're only available on the phone. But when you view them, they are actually in place. They are situationally aware. They are on the fountain so you can have that interaction. Augmented reality is an amazing technology, and I know the next speaker is going to talk a lot about it, and it has a tremendous future in a lot of places. But as far as the industrial application of that, it is somewhat limited in today's market based on the amount of devices that are available that make that experience useful in an industrial scenario. So if you look at the Vuzix, Andy, that you showed, or the RealWear, or the Google, or the Panasonic, or the Toshiba, I mean, there's so many of these monocular devices out there. They have small screens. And even though it's right in front of your eye and you have a really good way to view it and you can see a lot of what's on that screen, it is a more challenging environment to then recreate the real world, superimpose digital imagery on top of that, and ask the worker to find the little green square on the little green screen or whatever that may be. Again, in a minute, I know we're going to have a speaker come talk about a device that is much more capable for these things. But in our world, we typically use the term AR to mean assisted reality, not augmented. Assisted reality is the concept that you are getting information on demand, usually voice activated, and that information is designed for making your job more efficient, less mistakes, whatever the goal of the program may be. And that technology is very heavily proliferated across industry, even today, much more so than I think the general public is really aware of. There are, again, wearables of all types being used to solve every kind of problem imagined. From picking and logistics to inspections of machines to assembly in the biggest automotive plants in the world to maintenance on every kind of truck part and machine you can possibly imagine. Having the ability to give you information on demand has multiple benefits. First off, in a lot of technical careers now, there is an aging workforce, and a lot of my customers, some of the biggest companies in the world, struggle to replace the most senior engineers, repair people, managers in that regard. and having the less experienced employee or even the brand new employee have access to the instructions they need to do their job on demand as they need it, anytime without impeding their process by having their hands free, is proving to be a very effective training tool. And that may be an unintended consequence of these devices, but we're seeing that as a key factor in the decision making among a lot of the largest companies in the world, because we talk a lot about a term called tribal knowledge. Tribal knowledge is the idea that if Bill doesn't come to work today, nobody can fix the radiator because Bill's the only guy who knows how to fix the radiator. Well, that has to be a thing of the past. We have technology available to you that allows you to digitize and synthesize these workflows into a way where anybody can have access to them in a way that makes sense for them, in their language, in their own device, in a way that they can use very readily. So assisted reality is very proliferated. Wearable technology, very proliferated. But I think we're just still on the cusp when it comes to using augmented reality in the industrial workspace.
That was a very thorough answer. Thank you there, Josh. So, some of the applications that Teamviewer has come across, what verticals has really been taking off with wearables or specifically smart glasses that you've seen in the AR space?
Yep, there are a lot. One of the things that we struggle with is that our technology can be used in so many different ways that we really have to approach the client very holistically and try and find out what problems they're trying to solve. But I'll tell you, there's really two that I think are maybe a little bit more advanced. The first one would be logistics. Logistics is a very complex part of most big businesses. I don't care if you're a manufacturer, or a distributor, or a retailer, or what you do. You have a logistics piece to your business. You need to receive items, or make them, or ship them, or count them, or whatever it may be. And this may surprise you, but something like, I don't know the actual number, it's like 30% or some huge number of warehouses around the world in 2021 are still using pen and paper.
Not surprised. Yeah.
And there's just a long way to come that they see now that this technology has become affordable. It's become something that they can implement rather easily. The journey into AR is much shorter than it used to be. You can proof of concept this for a low amount of money in a very short period of time. So logistics, in order to solve all of those repetitive details that happen over and over again, keep people from their brains wandering. One of the issues they have in logistics, if you ask me to pick the same thing over and over again all day, there's a chance that my brain might miss one of those. And it's not that I don't mean well or I'm not the best employee, it's just the way the human brain works. And having those visual cues in front of you, the picture of the item, the quantity of the item, having to say confirm, having to actually put the process through every time, keeps you from making those mistakes. So logistics is definitely one.
Yeah. And then, go ahead. For the second one. Yeah.
Yeah, for the second one is definitely remote collaboration or remote support. So what we're doing right now, Zoom or FaceTime or Skype, only designed for the wearable device, the ability for me to see what you're seeing, provide you remote support, cut down on the time that we need to fix problems remotely. I think COVID was the big driver there. Suddenly, every maker of every machine everywhere in the world could not go to fix those machines when they broke. Yeah. And now big companies, the biggest auto companies, the biggest retailers are all looking at how can I provide support without actually having to send people there all the time.
Yeah. I basically agree with that. This is a productivity tool, and if we all think back about the mouse who made us more productive in terms of our work, in terms of computers, and then our smartphones made it a little bit more productive. Now, I think this is kind of the next evolution of productivity. One of the things that really surprised me, Josh, was how much voice recognition is in these glasses, because I'm thinking you see things. I really did not appreciate the workflow rules that Teamviewer had implemented in terms of voice. Hey, something's wrong. Okay, call supervisor. That was really amazing to know that this is really integrated. That can you speak to applications where it really brings everything together? You got the remote worker, you got the camera. Like there seems like there's 4 or 5 different sensor type of things in here. What's the most complex type of AR solution that you've come across?
Oh boy,
keep it short.
Sure. I would say the most complex solutions are those that require real-time collaboration and input from people who are very disparate. So you've got people in Europe who bought the machine or who made the machine, and people in the United States who own the machine, and the software provider who's in Colombia who's trying to provide support on this machine, and they're all collaborating in real time, and each person's having to present their piece of the story in a way that resonates with everyone else remotely. This is not all of us standing in the same room. There are new rules. And so that piece of it becomes very complex. Now, I refuse to do a commercial for what I do. There are softwares that make some of that easier, mine and others. But the key being that that type of collaboration isn't possible even with the software we're using right now. I can't annotate your screen. I can't pull an image off of something you're doing and modify it and then reshare it. We can't be collaborative in this environment. So these tools give us more collaborative tools.
That's cool. Yeah, I think when we first met, you showed me some video. I don't know if you have that
I'd like to,
available.
Yeah,
because it was really amazing what was possible. You know, just really blows your mind in terms of what AR can do and what it should do.
Let me share my screen. I do want to show two different videos, and then I have a good wacky example I want to show as well. So, Andy, if you could let me know, and you can see my screen.
Yeah, we see your DHL AR. Yep, we see it.
Okay, so this is a DHL facility that they run for Ricoh copiers. And in this facility, they use the glasses in an entirely voice-activated way. You'll see in a moment. This gentleman's pulling a trolley, and that trolley has 15 drawers. So that's what's been recreated for him in the glass. This is all completely voice-activated. He says out loud, aisle T1, followed by location 0253, followed by pick 2. And at that point, it shows him we should place those items in the box in the trolley, and he places them correspondingly. And right at that moment, he gets the next pick, and he can keep right on moving hands-free. When I show this example, I always like to point out a very unintended consequence of this program globally at DHL is that we have cut onboarding time for new employees by 80%. Used to be 1 full day in the classroom learning how to use the scan gun and the pick process, and then 2 full days shadowing before you were allowed to pick alone. Today, it's 4 hours learning how to use the glass software, and then you pick on day 1.
Wow.
Okay, so that was a good example of assisted reality. Andy, did you have a comment there? I'm sorry.
No, I was frozen. Yeah, it was just amazing that the amount of training time you're reducing. And you said you had another video. Yeah.
I do. I have one more I'd like to show. I gotta find it. Here it is. This is using, not to steal any thunder from upcoming presentations, but this is more of a mixed reality solution. This is an industrial solution using the HoloLens where there are several key advantages to this device. You'll see in this particular workflow, there's a CAD model, a 3D model of the item that she's working on. She's able to pull that model right out, and in the same frame, while she's working on that model, she's actually able to make a remote call and get support on that. And that's some of the power of these newer devices that allow us to have all of these advanced functionalities. So she can pull out the model, she can call someone remotely on the same screen and get help, and then that person can guide her through actually making the repair right there in real time.
Yeah, it's simply amazing where you are truly hands-free and you have so much power at the palm of your hands through these glasses. So before we move on, I'm going to ask you, what is your wacky wearable?
All right, I got one for you. So this isn't so much a wearables, but since I'm focusing here on AR, I just absolutely love this. I got to share it with everyone. If you haven't seen this before, this is the aquarium in Tokyo, Japan. And they wanted to drum up some marketing and some attention, and boy, did they ever. They created an AR app that if you were within 1 kilometer of the actual aquarium, you can whip out your phone, and they actually digitized a fleet of penguins, and you can follow the penguins from wherever you are all the way to the aquarium.
Nice. That is cool. Yeah, it makes going to the aquarium even more fun.
That's awesome. Right.
Yeah,
and what's cool is they show you in this video, they actually brought the penguins into a mocap studio, I mean, the whole bit, and actually digitized them. So pretty cool use of AR.
So yeah, so with that, I'd like to introduce our next speaker, Tom Harshbarger there. How, Tom, are you? Oh, you're on mute.
Yeah, doing great, Andy, and thanks for getting the name right this time.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I'll get it one day. Tom, so you, let me pull up your bio here, and if I may. So Tom, you lead the Microsoft practice for Synnex, Vice President of Microsoft Cloud, Devices, and IoT, and the business units. You also are a stakeholder in the company initiatives as it pertains to AI, mixed reality, IoT, and public cloud. You've also led the design, sales, engineering, and development for the Stellar team. So I think, Tom, you've got a pretty good mix of everything from IoT to cloud, and then now you have smart glasses and HoloLens under your umbrella. So with that, I wanted to ask of you, since Microsoft and HoloLens has been in the news lately, and probably the biggest one that's been in the news was, I believe, the U.S. Army announced the contract with HoloLens. I think it was something like $21 billion over a 10-year period for some sort of HoloLens type headset for soldiers. Tell us the story of HoloLens and how that Microsoft evolution came to be, and maybe share with us some applications.
Yeah, sounds great. And thank you very much for having me here. Great to join the rest of your speakers and reach the audience. So a little story about how HoloLens came to be. I don't know how many people are familiar with Microsoft's research arm. Think about it as a $5 billion a year startup that goes and looks for cool stuff to build. The group is amazing. They're researching everything from how to sequence DNA properly to beat cancer at the source, to all sorts of technological things. So it's both humanitarian and technological. The story of HoloLens begins actually in the year 2000, when Microsoft Research started using video, infrared, eventually radar, to develop a device that could see a human. All right, somebody might be talking off mute there. Started then with using those technologies to create a device that could actually capture human movement at the major joints, head, legs, etc. 10 years later, Microsoft Xbox Kinect hit the market. And that was actually the first public product in that journey towards where we are now, which is mixed reality. That eventually led to the first HoloLens, which was a great proof of concept and did an amazing job of building neck muscles. And then now has led us to HoloLens 2, which you can see on the screen. And just to tie in a few points from the earlier speakers, this is not your 8 to 10 hour a day wearable. As Walt mentioned, if we strapped a car battery to the back of your head, this thing could run for days, but you might end up having some neck issues. It's not LTE enabled, so you need Wi-Fi, and I'll talk about that a little bit more, simply because the power drain on LTE or any other wireless connection is so much higher. But what you do have is a high-end computer and a really comfortable headset with lots and lots of cool stuff to talk about. So I'm going to go ahead and launch into it just a little bit. There we go. So I promise not a lot of these slides, but just to give you an idea of, this is Microsoft's story and path. It's not dissimilar to Google, AWS, others as well. There's a lot of agreement about this, but intelligent cloud. What does that mean? It means a ton of things, but if we frame it into the mixed reality world, what it means is the HoloLens device, the 2D devices that go with it. You can use Google Glass as complement, Teamviewer, all sorts of things. They require connectivity, intelligent edge, and intelligent cloud. And why is that? There is a lot of real-time processing you can do on HoloLens 2 to identify objects. We built something very similar to the DHL setup here at Synnex for our warehouses to train people to be able to pick, pack, ship day one instead of 2 weeks of training. So the device can do a bunch of that. But hardcore analytics, managerial decision-making, BI, those things, that's not going to happen on your face. And so then you start talking about edge devices, be they wireless routers that have some intelligence on them, or other devices. You need edge processing for real-time processing and feedback to your devices beyond what the device can do. And then you need some form of public cloud, in our case, Azure, that can do the real crunching, the artificial intelligence, the machine learning, decision trees, all that. And so you end up with a device that is very powerful on its own, but in no way, shape, or form reaches its potential until it has communication, edge compute power, and then back-end compute power. So it makes for a really nice cascade of technologies you can introduce to better the experience. And for all of us, there's an opportunity to blow away your customer, but also, create a sales channel for yourself, because we're a distributor, we ship boxes, but my group doesn't ship boxes. We could sell HoloLens all day at 2% margin and think we're doing great. That's no good, there's no value. So working with the likes of you, wrapping actual solutions around it, and then the whole story onto the public cloud gives us all an opportunity to work with customers for years. And then just a visual, given all we've talked about today. If you think about augmented reality, virtual reality, so virtual reality is on the right. It's Oculus. It's you're blacked out to the world and living in the space in front of you. Really cool applications, not great for walking around a workspace. And then AR, augmented reality, is the physical world. Your 2D devices can do that well today. And then HoloLens creeps up into the middle on the mixed reality spectrum. So you're getting a rich display that's augmenting the world in front of you, whether it's with information communications, remote assist to repair that pipe that they can't come repair for you, but they can advise you over it. And so you're blending in kind of the best of both worlds at either end into a single device for it. So that's where that sits on the spectrum. And just a few looks at the use cases. So the picture here itself is awesome. And I don't know if any of you have really good eyes, you can squint over my shoulder here and see some of this stuff going for real. But I've worn one of these. The ability to see crisp, true, rich 3D images, charts, real-time feedback on this is absolutely amazing. And some of the top use cases for it, and obviously the Army's going to use it for everything it's worth. But BMW, Boeing, there's the list of Fortune 100, and now trickling down into SMB that are using these things. So improved skilling. I think both Josh and I have hit on that. Skill people up a lot more quickly, and your repair techs, your warehouse workers, even your business analysts don't have to be absolute experts all the time because they've got the device with them. They can look up anything from a parts manual to get somebody on the screen, actually marking on their screen to tell them what to do. Put this pipe here, turn that nut there, etc. Efficiency, obviously, not just in training, but think about the efficiency of having all this here while you're wearing it and being able to make real-time decisions as opposed to what's just generally slower. Conference calls, 2D screen in front of you with a flat Excel file in front of you. And then first-line workers, no bigger time than the last 15 months for this. The use cases across healthcare for being able to do face-to-face remote diagnosis, even some site-to-site advice during surgery, being able to see what each other is seeing, and so many other things. It's brought a lot more medical care to very sick people and healthy people in a way that does not require, a very expensive doctor on each and every case. The doctor can scale by helping frontline workers all along the way. So pretty cool stuff.
I have a question, for those who haven't put on these glasses for the very first time, where it's VR, AR, how much time does it take to get trained on to get used to that perception? And is there such a thing as AR, VR motion sickness? What have you seen out there?
Yeah, the longest straw in the onboarding is getting used to the weight on your head. And it's certainly no anvil, no Wile E. Coyote here, but it is different than putting on a pair of glasses or a hat. So it's getting the headset adjusted so that you're comfortable in your motion. In terms of uptime training, it is incredibly slow. It uses nothing but natural gestures with your hands, clicking objects, grabbing objects. You can actually type on the screen. And so they're all very fluid motions. We don't have to come up with any, swipe 4 fingers left and 1 thumb up and then wink if you want to get to that menu. Much more intuitive and human friendly there.
Very cool. Very cool. Thank you. Yeah.
Right on.
Yeah.
And I've talked about most of these already, so I'm not going to read the slide to you, but it just brings a little more life to a few of the scenarios we've talked about across assistance, collaboration, training, and then the last one being the contextual data access. I will say a little bit more about that. What's contextual data access? If you really think about it, that makes absolutely no sense. What it actually is being able to see your data, your analytics overlaid on your environment. So you want to see in the warehouse which SKUs are moving the fastest, where you have shortages, great. You can see that visually with colors, charts, etc. It's not a spreadsheet where you have to map back to a location. So you can really check out all sorts of hot spots, cold spots, employee performance, machine performance, all that kind of stuff using that kind of contextual data access. That's just a quick picture. Give you what it looks like up close and personal, and it really is amazing, version 1 to version 2. So the cameras, there are a lot of them, not only to orient where you are in space, but to give the right kind of feedback based on the right angle. So it's not just a flat display. You can move around in your context and what you're seeing and move left to right as well as your perspective. LiDAR, radar, all that good stuff in there. And then something really cool that is becoming more and more available is the use cases to go with HoloLens. Simply having that headset, great. However, lots of different harsh environments. So HoloLens with a hard hat, HoloLens with a full face shield for medical. There are just tons of use cases coming out every day, first and third party, that adapt these devices to the customer environment. Versus, think about somebody working in the field for an electric company, having to tiptoe around and adapt to a very fragile $3,000 computer on your face. Not well suited. So really making great progress there. And then this talks what we were talking about up at the very front, that the device itself is great, but it is in a community of technology and devices. Everything from your phones and tablets to drones to IoT devices, and then on up through the Microsoft technology stack, which is a really open stack, and it lets you take that input and data and then start doing pretty amazing things with it, and be able to show a real return on investment to your end customer, that's always the magic button for us is, did I get 20-to-1 return on the $3,000 or $10,000?
Right.
You can prove to the bottom line, you're in great shape. Required billboard of big customer names. So lots of automotive, aerospace, manufacturing, oil, gas, health, and public sector. List gets longer every day. And while these slides always focus on the names, hopefully everybody recognizes around the world, the names that you absolutely would not recognize unless you lived in Greenville, South Carolina, or some other location, is growing daily. We've had a lot of success with auto body shops, small chains, things of that nature, where they can use this device to get real-time feedback information, user manuals, making their skilled frontline workers even more efficient because they're not trolling through all the paper volumes and things that they traditionally do.
The questions and to Walt, for example, there was a question earlier about how do people feel about having a radio near their head, and you mentioned Wi-Fi, Bluetooth, still a radio, of some sorts, and now potentially talking about cellular. Are there any concerns there to have such a emitter near your head?
Yes. So there are, when it comes to something like cellular, there are actually regulations for how much energy is absorbed by the head. And it's significant enough that there's concern. It's still not completely proven just how big an issue it is. But then there are some people that are worried about signals as small as Bluetooth LE. And you saw that the power difference was about 1,000 to 1. So some people are worried about things they shouldn't be, but it's not an issue that is without concern.
Yeah. Yes, you're right. I mean, we've had Bluetooth headsets for the longest time, right? So certainly different technologies have what is it, SARS test, I believe.
Yes.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah. To get past that. Yeah. And there's some other questions here. There was questions about. Let me see if I could find. Someone had mentioned, how does the upcoming Wi-Fi 6 standard come into play with AR, VR? The additional bandwidth available is tremendous, seems to be a good fit. So would Wi-Fi, and this is to all the panelists, would Wi-Fi 6 be kind of the answer to truly making it an AR, VR, the device that could really do everything in real time?
I'll touch on that. So I can tell you that in the industrial world, in these giant factories, almost all of them experience dead spots on their Wi-Fi, no matter what they do. And 5G, WiMAX, Wi-Fi 6, and WiMAX are definitely solutions that big industry is counting on to make the coverage in their buildings, these 5 million square foot factories and up, better. So we're very much looking forward to that. Great,
thank you. And then we'll have one more question here. A lot of comments for a great presentation, everyone. Let me see if I could find something that is unrelated to power. A lot of power questions. So a question, I guess, back to you, Walt. Here it says, do headset glasses design rules include some sort of directional shielding between the wearable and the head?
Well, I presume we're talking about electromagnetic shielding, which is the issue of how much energy is absorbed by the head. And, having something heating my brain is something that does concern me. And there's not much shielding because we're not dealing with cellular signals. Wi-Fi, as far as I know, doesn't have a requirement for minimizing the absorption. It may have. And certainly there's nothing with Bluetooth. So you're getting something in your head. And, there have been lots of studies in this area, and there isn't a consensus on exactly how much of a problem it is. Part of the problem is that many of the studies were done by companies that had a stake in this industry.
We'll leave it at that. I like this question a lot, and I think to the smart glass folks, are these devices potential vectors for cyber attack, or do they have some sort of defense built in? So attacking your glass and controlling your head.
Well, even though, with the exception of the HoloLens, they're mostly Android tablets, so they would be as vulnerable or the same as any other Android tablet on the market. Okay. Yeah, there are definitely ways to exploit Android if you're not careful, and that's where I think a lot of our MDM partners come in to manage some of that. And you need a sharp IT team, but it's not something that we've faced to date. But at the same time, it's a real concern.
What do you think, Tom?
Yeah, so never will I say any device is impermeable. Having said that, though, a few things on HL2. So it's not running Windows, so your normal Windows attack vectors aren't there. As Josh just mentioned around device management, it runs Intune, or actually autopilot, on all of them. So instant wipe and reset without IT is available should you detect any breach. And then the entire Surface family, security starts at the actual chip before power up. and goes all the way out to the cloud. So in terms of concerns about those devices, we don't have much, but you're always one headline away from having a newfound concern. Nothing out there is bulletproof, clearly.
Right, right. That's good too. Yeah.
Sorry, I've got a comment on this. But did you have a comment before?
No, please. No, I'd love to hear it.
So we've developed lots of wearable devices. And when it comes to consumer products, there's not a lot of concern about security, particularly with a startup, because they have a choice of getting it to market fast or spending extra time and money and making it more secure. And when you go to buy something in a store, do you make a choice based on security? And if it is secure, how do you even prove it? Now, in the case of medical devices, it's a different story. The FDA has some recommended security measures. And when they recommend something, if you don't follow it, you're going to have a little bit of an issue. It doesn't mean you have to do it, but it's becoming standard. And then with large medical device companies, there have been enough stories that they're getting paranoid about security. So the security is changing, and I think it will eventually affect consumer products. For example, the government, U.S. government now requires a certain level of security on devices that they're buying, or it's going into effect soon. That will affect everything.
Great, thank you. Well, I know some of you are anxious to get a raffle for the fan, so I want to make sure we can do that. And if some of you want to leave after this, and we can certainly continue as more questions come in. So, Jeremy, if you're still there, if you can help us with the random raffle.
I am. I just did a random draw, and the winner is, drum roll, Marissa Hernandez. So,
Marissa,
congratulations. If you're still, looks like you're still on. So if you could just shoot me a quick chat with your contact or email or your address, then we can get that out to you as soon as possible.
Yeah, thank you, Marissa. Yeah, and send us a shot of it when you get it.
Yeah.
Love to see you using it.
Send a picture of it in use, and we can post that.
Right. So just to finish up, and if there's any more questions, for the panelists, last couple of questions here. Right now, we're just getting used to buying $1,000 smartphone, right? Some of us are and some of us aren't, but that's the going rate these days for a high-end smartphone. What do you think it will take, whether it be price or just application, to get these smart glasses mainstream? There is the famous story of Google Glasses trying to go mainstream, and that didn't happen for numerous reasons. Privacy was one of them. Tom, I'll start with you. What do you think it's going to take?
Sure. So a couple things. Evolution of technology for sure. Like anything, it's $3,000 HoloLens, this $2,000 that. In a couple of years, this device will be $1,000, and its big brother and sister will be around. So I think normal evolution of cost of technology probably going to be a bit delayed here, since producing anything right now around the world is a bit of a nightmare. So that's one part of it. And then I think the second part is intelligently building more, more specific feature sets. HoloLens now, flagship product, top end, it can do everything that a HoloLens can do. While the adaptability to different work environments, different headpieces, et cetera, is great, having more specialized devices for certain industries with maybe a smaller set of capabilities to make them more affordable and a quicker path to ROI is important. And I'm going to throw in a third one as well. The continued maturation of the technology around these glasses that support and extend it. So your tablet, your phone, the cloud, all these other pieces that don't require $3,000 to $5,000 every time you want someone to put something on their head.
Yeah, I would concur. How about you, Josh? What do you think is going to take it to make this mainstream?
I'm going to respectfully disagree with Tom and say that all those things are important. I'm not knocking any of them, but glasses are a personal expression. And until they make fashionable glasses that I can put on and feel really good about wearing, and they come in enough different looks and feels for me to feel fashionable wearing them, it's not going to succeed. I think Apple is going to come out with a device in the next 12 months that'll have 3 or 4 different frames and lens sizes. And until somebody cracks that nut and makes it a fashion statement to wear these, I don't think it's going to hit the consumer market.
So you're going with the cool factor. And I've looked online. They're saying that those glasses might come out at $500 or so, maybe a little bit more. We don't know yet, right?
Apple customers don't care.
Yeah, right. That's true. Right. It's Apple. So yeah, they've got the whole ecosystem. So yeah, that would certainly be important to see if that's going to stick. How about you, Walt? Mainstream question. Mainstream being, you'll see more of it every day.
Well, I think that we're already seeing the mainstream for business use. Mm-hmm. We've just seen software that really makes them useful and really saves money. And this is what we need. I think what's been holding it back for business use is the applications, and we're getting them. So that's happening. Now, for a device that costs more than $1,000, it's really hard to have that become a consumer product. That's been a major problem. And there's also been a lack of applications. So we'll see. Apple could change it. They've done that in the past. We'll see what happens. And my ability to foresee the future isn't so good.
Yeah. No, from an industrial, I think a point of view, Industry 4.0. I mean, that's definitely where it's going. And I could see a day where every logistic factory worker has one of these, whether it be a full-blown, HoloLens or kind of a smart glass. There's a comment here in the chat. Based on calculated savings, HoloLens can get people to pay for the lens via savings. Upfront capital will not allow smaller users to justify capital expenses. So kind of highlighting what you guys have said in terms of smaller users will have to justify it. So with that, does anyone else have any other comments? You are welcome to chime in and raise your hand. But if there aren't any other questions, I'd like to thank our wonderful panelists to share their views on wearables, smart glasses, HoloLens. I've learned some things being here, and I hope you guys have too. So with that, I want to close out. And Jeremy, I don't know if we have any closing slides. Let me see here.
I think maybe just some contact info.
Yeah, right. So with that, please join us for our next event at the WCA.org. We are a nonprofit, and we do work on sponsorship as well as donations. So if you have any interest there, please do contact us. And the Wireless Communication Alliance, one of the oldest wireless SIGs in the country since the 90s, we are continuing on, and our charter is to expand technology. And with the IoT applications, we're going to use that interest to tie into wireless. So thank you, everyone, for your time. Thank you, panelists. And we'll have this recording in about 48 hours for you to review.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks, Andy, and everybody.
Bye.
Thanks, guys. Great information. Really enjoyed it. Have a great day.
Thank you. All right.
Good job. Thank you.